Going to go ahead and start the recording. Thank you, Ethan, just as I remembered. Okay, so the what we'll be going over is the Lane County population overview, just sort of like what is the current context of Lane County, what are the economic drivers, where are people coming when they're coming into Lane County and leaving Lane County, the total population, the projections for that, and how that compares to the last time that we did these forecasts 4 years ago. I want to be clear about the changes that we made so you know how different it is from last time and why we've made these changes. And then changes to how births, deaths, and migration impact the total population change over time. Aging, how the new set of population forecast impact aging within the county as a whole and the race ethnicity diversity within the population as well. And then we'll go into the UGBs, which we have a number of. So I'm going to try and be quick through the first half of the session. So I know that people are really interested in the numbers for the UGBs, and then we got to get through those as well. And so we can have some discussion. But those numbers are, again, also going to be posted online. And I just want to be adamant that this conversation is the beginning, that we have several months to like update, and happy to make adjustments where adjustments are necessary to take into account things like new subdivisions, new public work projects, new industries that are coming in that we might not be known about. So appreciate that. And so just know that these are very, very preliminary, and that when we have the meetings that are happening in Lane County later in the cycle in February or March, those will be much more definitive. So Lane at a glance has a population of almost 400,000. The population who is age 0 to 17 is a little bit lower than Oregon as a whole, and population age 65 is a little bit higher. And we also have, similar to other counties within the region, a large student age population that is impacting the population structure for the county as well. The population who is non-white is about 16.45%. This is lower than Oregon as a whole, which is at 23.41. And persons per household is a little bit lower, 2.36 compared to 2.48. Although I will say that the county does have a sizable group quarters population, which doesn't factor into the persons per household calculation. So student populations living within dorms and things like that, that's a large number of people that are within a non-traditional housing, non-traditional unit. So that isn't impacting that number, that 2.36 that you're reading there. Oh, and we have this fun thing happening again. Okay. Looking at employment changes within the city, that you can see large growth predominantly in three industries. Trade, transportation, and utilities has really grown over time. Unsurprisingly, the industries around education and health services with the hospital and the university are also growing rapidly over time. And a little bit less, but still growing, is government jobs. Within Eugene, as well as also impacting, has historically been high and has continued to increase over time as well within the county. Similar to other counties within the region, manufacturing has declined over time as well, even in the sign of popular or general job growth within the area. And one that we like to keep an eye on too is construction in the area, as well as an indicator for housing as well. We also keep track of housing, of course. But you can see the decline with the recession, and then come back post 2020 with a lot of Oregon statewide initiatives of housing growth within the area as well. In terms of migration flows, when people are coming into the county, most who are coming in and leaving are coming in from Multnomah County, although Clackamas and Washington are also contributing to this in-growth as well. So the metro area leading into in-growth, and of course Marion, which is nearby. You also see this unique dynamic where a lot of people are coming in from California, from Los Angeles County. I think a lot of the highest out-of-state population for U of O is coming from Los Angeles County, or rather California. So this is where that big impact is happening over there. And when people are leaving the county, we're seeing Douglas County as well show up as a location for people in. Generally, though, more people are coming into the county than leaving the county, and that's leading to population growth within the area. So in terms of our forecasts, What are we expecting? We expect that Lane's population will continue to grow, although be at slower rate than what we've observed at a past, and of important note, slower than what we expected compared to last time that we make this forecast. And so I want to be really clear about what's shown in this graph here. Oh, whoops. Let's close that and adjust that. Everything on the left-hand side of this dotted line is a an estimate which comes from a combination of Portland State and census data. So this is everything that's happened in the past. To the right in the green is our current set of forecasts that we have, and in the black is the last time that we made these forecasts, which were published in 2021. So all counties in this region are showing lower projections that we made last time, taking into account those trends that we had mentioned in the overall meeting of what's happening across the state of Oregon. And so we just want to be really clear on what the difference is in terms of the number of like how different are we compared to last time. And I'll also be clear that Lane is projected to continue to grow, but it's a bit slower than what we were seeing last time and a bit slower than what historically has been happening. Um, what is driving this growth? Where are we coming in? Well, Lane is in this interesting position where even prior to the global pandemic, we saw more deaths than births that were happening within Lane County, which is unique in terms of counties within Oregon. So more people are not having as many kids, and more deaths are occurring relative to other counties. So that is contributing to population decline. And we are in this unique situation where net migrants, even in more recent years, are the ones that are solely contributing to population growth. So net migrants have to overcome this deficit in natural change. And we expect that deficit to be more and more as time increases, as people are having less kids and as the population ages as well. This increasing trend is, again, one that's not just impacting Lane, but impacting Oregon overall. And it's one that Lane just happens to be closer or further along the trend than a lot of other Oregon counties as well. And in order to make up the population growth, we're expecting, we're going to have to see increases in the population. So you see this slight shift upward in the total number of net migrants coming in order to accommodate the workforce that's required in there to sustain the current economies that are in the area related to healthcare, related to the university and other industries that are in the government as well that are native to Eugene or native to the Lane rather. So our birth projections, again, left of the dotted line, we saw a big decline in post 2020 in the total number of annual births, and that had already been built in. We saw total fertility rates declining within Kennett County, and again exacerbated by COVID. And since as of 2024, no signs that it's returning back to normal. And in fact, most demographers and fertility analysts think that this is going to continue to decline moving forward. And why you see this decline in stabilization in the total number of births that are happening within Lane. On the flip side, as Lane is continuing to age, the number of deaths that are occurring are increasing over time. So Lane, as a county, is older again than the state average, and so these deaths are going to impact the population trajectory as well, and why you see slower growth in the area. This isn't to say that people aren't experiencing healthier life expectancies than they were in the past. On the contrary, we expect, barring the COVID period, which saw declines in life expectancy, continued increases over time in terms of life expectancy. People are living longer lives. It's really due to the fact that we have an older age population contributing to higher deaths in the area that we have. And Lane has one of the lower, not the lowest, but one of the lower fertility rates in the area. Although we've seen a little bit of a bounce back in 2024, leading us to a little bit more optimistic fertility rates like moving forward. But we expect it to not bounce back. And again, why you're seeing declining fertility rates. And historically, life expectancy in Lane has been similar to what's in Oregon, but fertility rates have been much lower. Part of that is a student age population that's going on there, but there's also just people are having less kids, even when removing the student age population taken into account. In terms of population structure, we expect that the county will continue to age. You still see this disproportionate impact of the student age population as well for the county. It's less dramatic than what you would see in a county like Benton, where the student age population makes up a greater proportion of the total population, but still one that is sizable and makes it known. But at the same time, you see increases in the population who is older age. If you look at, population 65 plus in 1990, this really increased in 2020, and we expect it to increase moving forward to 2050 as well. So expected to continue aging within the population structure for Lane County as well. In terms of our race ethnicity projections, population is expected to continue to grow for non-white populations quicker than white populations. I think there's potentially some adjustments in the migration, which might stabilize the white population here that we might make, but historically, the non-white populations have been growing at a faster rate than the white populations for this area, and we expect that to continue to happen moving forward as well. Looking at specifics, UGBs, we have a lot of UGBs to go through here. So at this time, I want to transition over to discussing, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order, but I might just ask at the start of every UGB whether someone is here from the city. Or representing the city in any sort of capacity, so that we can have a discussion to make sure that we go through that as well. But I do want to note that most of the areas are growing in population, albeit at a somewhat slower rate than what we were forecasting previously. If not, I want to start with Coburg. Do we have a representative from Coburg here?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining the call. So for Coburg, population has seen some large increases and then stabilizations. From one year, it jumps 26%, then down to 5%, another jump to 26%. There is this interesting population dynamic with aging that's going on as well. That's harder to track down with smaller populations, where you can see the population age 65 plus has declined between 1980 and 2000, but then greatly increased by 2020. High employment rates for the city and household income tends to be, especially in recent years, and this is inflation adjusted, really high. I know that there's only so much that I can know about every city within the area, and this is why we bring people on the call as well. I know there's this interesting RV manufacturing that happens within the city that's impacting sort of the demographic and population and economic dynamics within the area as well, within the city. So and I do want to review just really quickly the UGB to make sure that we have this boundary correct, that there hasn't been an expansion since the last time. The city boundary is in green, and then the UGB boundary is in blue. I'm not sure how much buildable lands is in the blue area. There might be some around here along Selby Way, but just confirming that this is the correct boundary that we have.
The blue area has been annexed into the city.
Has been annexed, and so the city has changed, but not the UGB.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. So that doesn't change the forecast, but that does let me know that we need to update our files for making those comparisons. So thank you for that. Um, city updated boundaries. UGB. Great. And then, so Coburg is one of these areas that actually has lesser impact in terms of the population forecast compared to other areas. We're pretty much on some years lower, some years higher than last time, but pretty similar in the population forecast that we're going. A lot of what's driving this is the optimistic housing growth that we thought was going to occur is still really occurring in Coburg. So along the same lines, I I know cities are remiss to say that isn't actually what's happening when that's our expectations, but I appreciate just sort of confirmation if you can on like that's generally like what's been happening over the past decade and more importantly maybe over the past 3-4 years, because that seems to be what been seeing in our data.
Yes, that seems to align with subdivision development.
Okay. Great. Yep. So again, I think a little bit less to talk here just because things are very similar compared to what we had last time. Coburg has historically been a huge outlier in terms of growth. So here, and again, we'll do this for every UGB, a comparison between the county, the region as a whole, so all counties within the region, as well as the US. And you can see Coburg is just growing much faster than other locations. And we expect that to slow down. Populations can't sustain that high level of growth, but still be higher than the rest of the county. Cottage Grove. Do we have someone here from Cottage Grove? I think I saw someone on the call.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay, great. So again, for Cottage Grove, this is an interesting one because historically we've seen big increases in the number of housing units, but we saw really slow housing production between 2010 and 2020. So that is informing our more recent expectations of population growth for Cottage Grove and our baseline assumption. So when you see the next slides in our population projection, I just want you to make sure that that's informing, and we're happy to change that if that isn't what the expectation is in the coming years as well. Because we right now are seeing high housing occupancy rates, and if we are seeing slow housing growth, then we're seeing this bottleneck in terms of like what's occurring in more recent years between 2010 and 2020, especially when you have all these other indicators of high population growth like high employment rates and persons per household. So I want to again make sure that we have the correct boundaries, city as well as UGB for Cottage Grove, because we have some sizable differences here in the area. You can shout out if this isn't correct. We'll also post these online so you can zoom in and make sure you don't have to say here. And I think I said this before, but again, this is the beginning of conversation. We don't have to figure out everything here. This is just sort of to generate conversation. We expect to follow up an email with a lot of you and for you to reach out to us as well if we're missing something. So if it doesn't get discussed here, please know that we have several months to make sure that we get all this right. This is really like an information based and to make sure that we're all on a baseline understanding so that we may make the final forecast that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, for the most part, that's correct.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so what we're seeing here is we had modest growth last time, and that's even less growth this time because of this slow housing unit expectations. That's really impacting what we're seeing with the bottleneck in terms of housing growth impacting here. Again, this is one that we're open, definitely open into changing to, but what our baseline is right now. I'm not sure what buildable lands looks like in terms of the areas that is outside of the city, but in the UGB there. But know that this is our forecast right now. And while it is in line, even by 2040 for what we had last time, this doesn't capture the fact that between 2010 and 2020, we had this big population growth. The dynamic that we see with cities sometimes, a lot of times actually, is when you have big population growth without the housing growth, that in the following years that you see slower population growth while housing tries to catch up to that population growth as well. So this is the dynamic that we're forecasting here into it. But again, happy to make adjustments if we are seeing if we expect to see greater than expected housing growth within the area as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. And again, we don't have to, happy to hear follow-up conversation about the areas as well. We don't have to discuss everything here. Kind of similar situation for Cresswell, where the population has outpaced housing production, as well as someone here from Cresswell. I will just say that if no one is here, it's kind of a similar story where we had huge housing growth and a custom huge population growth prior, but we're seeing slower growth in the housing, and that is impacting the forecast. There is this proximity to other locations that makes Cresswell a attractive area as well in terms of where it's located proximity-wise to Springfield and Eugene. If you're watching this video later, please review the boundaries that we have to make sure that those are correct and the city or the UGB don't need to be updated. But that is really impacting our forecast here, and we had a pretty optimistic growth last time, and that has shifted. And again, we're not opposed to making adjustments to this, but with the more recent slowing down of housing, this has caused us to adjust our population growth quite substantially from the last time. I expect that we'll probably reach out specifically to Cresswell to clarify this and get some input from them because I haven't seen mention
I
from them.
apologize. I'm
Oh,
representing Cresswell. I'm here.
oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry, I mean, maybe I just didn't hear you before. Yeah, so this is kind of the same dynamic as well. Slowing housing growth in the area, leading to slower population growth. I'm trying to figure out if there was a subdivision that was potentially planned that was captured in the last forecast that isn't captured here, or anything along those lines. Happy to discuss it now, or if you want to follow up after email and we can come back to this, we can do that as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have a moratorium on development because our
I
city
see.
is at capacity. So we have a ton of inquiries, like a ton of demand for
Yeah.
development, but we have such little production.
Okay, that's super important. So what we usually do, and this has happened before, is sorry, did you say it was sewage or water related or something along those lines?
Sewage.
Yeah, so we've had this before, and what we usually do, and for those forecasts and anyone else who this cities that happen to as well, we put like a stall on growth, and then it sort of like picks up and tries to take into account that like, oh, this is going to actually allow for more growth in like the future. So you'll see like stabilization for some time and then a pickup in later years. So we want to make sure that we account for the schedule of that moratorium and that when that ends and what the expectations are for development. So I'll say for right now that we'll probably reach out to you about that, about the dates and the specifics for that, and probably push that conversation to later. But this is what we want to hear in these conversations.
Okay. Yeah, it's helpful. We're updating our residential buildable lands inventory too. So
Super helpful. Thank you so much for yeah. Okay. And then yeah, slower growth there. Dune City again, almost no change in the housing growth over recent years. And so is someone here from Dune City? One of the smaller areas. And Dune City is also, Lane County is like a tale of two cities a lot of the time because you have the coastal cities and the non-coastal cities where places like Dune City look more similar to regions and the coastal regions in region 3, and there's this like interesting dynamic where the population who is age 65 plus is much higher than the rest of the state as well. Vacancy rates tend to be, I should look at this first. Yeah, vacancy rates tend to be a lot higher, and that is because of the propensity of using housing as vacation rental homes, things like that, or vacation homes or short-term rental homes. Um, Tend to impact this as well. And for most of these, we have slower growth as well. There are changing dynamics between 2010 and 2020. We actually saw upticks in the number of coastal cities growing. We don't think the kind of growth that it experiences necessarily something that is going to continue moving forward because it tends to be a migration of retired age population moving into there. That's all one-time uptick burst, but we have seen cities that can have sustained migration in that regard. So if someone is here from Dune City or watching this later, something that we want to make sure that we get right in our forecast as well. And that's why you see it a little bit different than what we saw last time as well. And I expect that housing unit change is probably to do with the buildable land inventory and just being nestled up against um, protected swamp or protected flood areas and everything as well. Eugene, I believe I saw someone on the call from Eugene here.
Yes, there's a couple
Yep.
of us.
Okay, great. Totally. Yeah. And again, a lot to talk about here, and I don't expect that we'll be able to get over everything. But again, just want to give general trends of like what's been happening. Pretty sizable population growth. Not as high as what we saw in the 90s, but still hovering around 10%, and slowing of housing unit growth, which is going to impact the population growth as we have this pent up need for housing. So what you're going to see is, I guess we should make sure again that we review the boundaries for the city and the UGB in particular in this northwest section of the city where there's this big difference. Does this look about right?
Yep.
Okay, great. And again, you know, details if you want to zoom in or check anything out, we'll be posting this online as well for you to review. So actually a little bit less than change than most other cities are seeing as well. We have toned it down. It's nothing specific to UGB, to Eugene, the Eugene UGB on why we've toned this down. This is mostly of statewide, countywide. We have seen these you know, these impacts in population change that are causing us to tone down the population growth for all areas. So what you're seeing here is just sort of this overall adjustment that actually this is probably what's happening. I will say embedded into this is the assumption of no growth in the group quarters population, which for Eugene and you know, the college student population is pretty sizable. So if there is an expectation of actually we are going to expand one of the universities, you know, population of the area. I know U of O is a big one, but there's also oh, I'm forgetting other names of other universities in the area as well.
Yeah, we just submitted our population survey this morning, right before
Okay.
the meeting. And so we gave you the latest information that we have from U of O, which is
Okay.
generally that they have 3 scenarios they're looking at, no growth, more growth, or a decline. And they have not selected either of those to be the one that they're projecting.
Okay.
We
Do you know?
have not heard from Bushnell or LCC is the other
Okay.
one that that has a campus in Eugene.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And it would be great. I can follow. I'll make a note to follow back up with you about the about that survey. And I expect that we'll be in conversation a bit, you know, just about this to make sure that we're in getting these numbers right and accounting for everything that we should be accounting for.
That's
But generally, yeah, generally very similar to what we were forecasting last time. Eugene is slightly above the rest of the region, you know, definitely above Lane County, which has, you know, seen some growth, some decline over time as well. So interesting dynamics here in terms of its growth. Someone from Florence on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Yeah. And again, another one probably relates as well with this coastal city that has large population, 65 plus, a little bit lower occupancy rate compared to other locations as well, and slower housing unit growth. And I expect that you're probably dealing with a geography that's limiting housing productions as well. And you know, a lot of times I did have a comment here asking about the relationship with Asetta Beach. Last I was checking you know, this area hadn't been annexed. I don't know if there's any plans for annexation given that it's within the UGB, but not within the city. And then looking at the other areas that are over here, I'm guessing these aren't buildable and probably not eligible for UGB expansion. But right now our population projections look a little bit less optimistic than what we saw last time. And part of that is because of the slow housing unit growth. Again, something that we're open to changing, but you know, wanted to have these discussions taking into account the geography and what you're seeing on the ground over there and the potential for population growth within Hasita Beach, which I don't know if that a lot of that area qualifies for residential expansion as well.
The Hasita Beach area is mostly developed. There are a few lots that are larger lots that have annexed recently that are looking and hoping to develop. They just have stalled due to capital investment and different developers being in different stages of readiness. There are some changes to this map. We've experienced multiple annexations every year.
Okay.
Last several years, and LCOG has been great in helping us keep our maps going to the Department of Revenue and Secretary of State. But yeah, there are definitely some edits to this.
For the city or for the UGB? Just want to clarify.
No, for the city. Our
For the
UGB
city.
has not changed.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. Yeah, and that, yeah, definitely. And I want to make sure that we have on file those updates. But they will not change the forecast. It's when the UGB changes that the numbers for the forecast will change. So I want to make sure that I have those, but still have those, right? So thank you for that.
And just as a minor aside, so when Huda was speaking about the estimates, we do track the housing and population changes associated with the annexations. We just don't always have the maps on where
Right.
they happened. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Right. And then we
And
do
so-
have a lot of housing that is it's just stalled due to capital.
Yeah, and I will reach out to you about what state each of those developments are in. Did you already fill out a survey? I'm sorry, I missed some of the ones that came in recently.
Yeah, I
Oh.
filled it out during the break.
Great, great, great. I appreciate it. Okay, awesome. So I may follow up with you if I have any clarifying questions on the survey, but I appreciate you filling that out. Those often answer a lot of our questions.
But
Junction City. And then I think I saw someone from Junction City on the call.
I'm
Yeah.
with LCOG, but I'm representing Junction City.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Yeah. And so here, moving back a little bit more inland, higher occupancy rate, very low population under 65. Again, this other side of Lane County and the cities over there, big population increase, pretty sizable housing increases as well. There's this interesting stretch of the UGB that goes pretty, and the city as well, that goes pretty far down. I will ask just maybe really quickly if you're knowledgeable about this, of whether these look like they align with your understanding. If you're, yeah, totally understand that you're with LCOG as well. And this is like city information most of the time, so I may just reach out to them. Because of this big population increase that like and housing increase that we saw between 2010 and 2020, you know, our forecast from last time, which didn't have the 2020 census, were definitely underestimates. Junction City is, you know, expected to, one of the cities that across all time periods has a projection that is higher than it was last time. You know, there are definitely some economic reasons for that, proximity to Eugene and everything like that in regard to it. But yeah, generally higher than what we saw last time. And again, much
I'll
higher.
just say real quick that
Yeah.
I will. The survey is pending, but they are also heading into a sewer moratorium. So
That will affect it, and I appreciate you telling me that information as well. Yeah. Okay, we'll have to follow up because those just required a little bit more information extraction on our end, but I appreciate that. Yeah,
no problem. And you can contact me and I'll facilitate with the city manager if
great.
need be. Thanks.
Great. Lowell, again, it's someone on the call from Lowell. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Lowell.
This is Jacob Collister with LCOG. I don't see the city manager on, so we do planning similar to the Junction City relationship. So we don't have perfect insight, but might be able to weigh in a little bit here.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is one where the one comment that I did have, smaller, kind of nestled up against the river, and had some population growth or housing growth, and I expect that like there's still potential for more housing growth. I know that there was a fire that also impacted housing growth more recently, and so our expectation is a little bit more modest than last time, although we're expecting to still continue to see, you know, population growth within the area as well.
Can you speak to the fire part there, just with a little more detail?
Yeah, I had written down in my notes that it wasn't in the city itself, but there was the impact of Jones Fire that maybe happened 3-4 miles outside of the city. And I just had to make a question about whether that was impacting housing or development in the area at all. It wasn't within the boundaries or anything, but
Yeah.
I just had marked as a question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's impacted. I was just curious if it had literally impacted the numbers, the forecast that you have, but I don't.
No, I just had it as a question to
Gotcha.
ask.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, what's driving the slower expectation is the slower housing growth in the area than what we're seeing relative to population growth. So again, this like stalling effect that's happening over there. And so if there are new subdivisions, although I haven't seen, there isn't really a difference between the UGB and the city boundary to my understanding, but maybe I'll reach out And
Yeah, I think
clarify on that.
that would be a good idea. There has been more activity, I would say, in Lowell than in other comparable communities from a development standpoint. They have smaller subdivisions, but
Okay.
there's a few teed up, so that would be
Okay.
a good follow-up, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will do. Appreciate it. And Oak Ridge. Do we have someone from Oak Ridge? I'll just go through again, review of the boundaries. Over here, a little bit lower employment rate than other areas that we've seen, and a little bit higher population, 65 plus. We've seen pretty low growth within the area. And this is something that we expect to see moving forward. We had a bit more optimism last time. I'm wondering if that had to do with a subdivision that was under the works that may have recently or is going to in the near coming future come to fruition. So I'll mark that down as a follow-up. But otherwise, this is the baseline that we have right now. Springfield, definitely know we have someone from Springfield's on this call.
Yes, I'm here,
Yep.
Sandy.
And hi, Sandy. And yeah, population who is age 65 plus, lower than the county and the rest of the state. High number of housing unit increase, although that really stalled between 2010 and 2020 as well. And employment rate has been very high. There is, I think, probably some annexations that we're missing within the city boundaries in here, and I do have this marked as one place to definitely look up into. But the UGB boundary, I think is the big question here as well, to make sure that this looks right. And again, we'll post these online for review. But generally, if that looks okay, if there isn't something glaring that's standing out over there.
The UGB looks good.
Okay, yeah, and I already have it marked down that I know that there's missing of the city annexations in recent years that have gone in there, so we'll definitely be incorporating on there. So I know part of the slow housing growth I'd marked down in my notes is limited outward expansion possibilities because of floodplains and like the city being nestled in between the two rivers that I think you had commented on, and thank you for getting that survey in very early. I appreciate that. Or any comments that you were able to make. So that's good. And so what we're seeing here is, again, some of that impact in terms of population growth. One that even last time we had really modest expectations for growth. And what you're continuing to see here is sort of a stabilization in the population as well. And again, that has to do with more recent housing unit changes within the area and sort of this knowledge of sort of like the limitations of housing growth. Would love to speak with you more on that, either now or just at another time in the near future as well. We can follow up after this conversation as well.
I will say we've had an uptick in housing over the past several years, but I don't know that we'll be able to sustain it long term because
Okay.
of the geographic factors you said, as well as infrastructure limitations.
Yeah, that's what I have, and I don't have the most recent numbers of housing units in here, but we do take those into account when we're making the forecast as well. And just sort of what I haven't seen in recent years as well is an uptick, but not enough to meet up with like the population demand. So just that's what you're seeing here in the forecast as well. And I expect these might change slightly, but the general trend of what we're seeing is I think what's reflected in what you've said as well. Okay, and Vanetta?
Yes, I'm here for Vanita.
Oh, Vanita, sorry about that. Increases in housing units have been not as high as they were between 2000 and 2010, but a big increase in that period and a modest increase after that. It looks like my understanding is that the city and UGB boundaries are synonymous, that there is not a difference. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay, gotcha. And I'm not sure if you have I haven't seen anything about potential UGB expansions in there. That's not on my radar.
We still have a lot of undeveloped land within the city limits.
I see. Okay, gotcha. Because of that slow housing unit growth, we haven't included anything I wanted to ask about here about potential subdivisions that were in the area. as well that are upcoming or slated as well, or just sort of any other things that we should take into account about, you know, an uptick in housing unit development, given that you said that there's a lot of potential buildable land in the area?
Yeah, we have a number of housing projects approved. Whether that translates to actual units is something else, but I haven't filled out the survey yet. I will get
Okay.
that to you.
Okay, yeah, and no worries, like we use this also as like a mechanism to elicit survey responses as well. So if you haven't filled out the survey, I'll send a follow-up afterwards. We would love to get those in before December 15th. So that we can finalize everything. And yeah, after then I might, you know, come after you individually and ask about things, but if you can fill out that, especially the housing unit survey, or even just mention about housing units in the general survey, that's a big help for us. So yeah, just let us know the status of that, because we want to make sure that we're capturing everything that we should be capturing. And then I believe this is the last one. Is there anyone here from Westford?
Kind of a similar deal with LCOG. We do some planning
Gotcha.
for Westford. I'm not going to have a ton of insights, but
Totally.
probably similar follow up to Lowell's. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll reach out with them. It's hard with these smaller populations. And again, with smaller populations, it's important that we get any information that we can off the ground about new subdivisions or new developments or new industries that are happening. Otherwise, we've seen pretty stable population. And so that's the expectation moving forward as well. And this impact is really coming from the adjustments downward that we've made because, you know, births and migration have slowed down a bit, and this is the trickle down effect that's happening with Westford. But happy to account for that if we know about other things that are happening within the area.
Yeah, just a head start there. Westford can be a challenging community to formally contact. So Neil, if I'd be happy to share my contact info in the chat, or
okay,
I think we'd be maybe a more effective starting place to facilitate that conversation.
Would very much appreciate that. Thank you. And I might be leaning on you for other locations as well.
Yeah, no, happy to help for sure.
Okay, great. If there, I believe this is everything. Yeah, and I'll go ahead. Is there any questions or any like general overview? Again, this is extremely, I appreciate you taking the time to join on this meeting. This is extremely helpful for us to get insight about everything that's in there to make sure that we have the right data, whether we need to update our GIS files or our understandings of new developments or anything. Thank you. Appreciate sharing that. Or anything along those lines. And then over the next couple of months, we're going to be finalizing the forecast. And the next time that we do these forecasts, we'll, you know, be either in Lane County or an adjacent county nearby, hoping to see many of you in person to get these numbers finalized and everything.
I've got a quick question,
Yeah.
not about the projections themselves, but in terms of the ONA, the housing needs that
Yes.
are being done, will they be basing it on your final projections? Or are they going to take into account any of your preliminary numbers when they come out with numbers for next year?
So it's my understanding that those are going to be all based off of the final numbers. I'll clarify with DLCD, but it's the final numbers that were either made last time, or as soon as these numbers get published in June, it'll be the final numbers this time. I can say it won't be the preliminary numbers at all, that it's going to be the final numbers either last time or as of June for this time. That will be the premise for which they make it. And again, I also want to say that the ONAs aren't solely based on the forecast, that there's also the unmet housing need dynamic as well as the unhoused current population that go into that as well. So we're one of three components that go into the ONA, just so that, you know, we know that it's like it's a 3-portion thing, and sometimes there's other dynamics that housing needs to catch up for. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And if there isn't any more questions, I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And again, if there is something that you think about